Welcome to the Macke Makerspace. Hi, I'm Brother Bob Macke. In my day job, I am the curator of meteorites at the Vatican Observatory. That is the astronomical observatory that is part of the Vatican. And I have an interest in the history of other observatories sponsored by the papacy. This particular project that we're going to start on today is one of those observatories. It was built on the roof of the Church of St. Ignatius in Rome, which is part of the complex of the Collegio Romano, the Roman College. And this is not just any observatory. This is where several fields of astrophysics were pioneered. It was built by Father Angelo Secchi in the mid-19th century. He did stellar spectroscopy and spectral classification of stars. He studied solar physics, solar prominences, studied terrestrial magnetism and the relationship between the Earth's magnetic field and solar activity. Meteorology, he invented some instruments for the measurement of weather, and several other things. And this is the location where all of that work was done. So this project is going to be quite big. It's roughly 1/180th scale. It's very complex. We're going to break the project into about 5 parts. A lot of work to do, so let's get started. They say the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and so here we begin with a humble piece of poster board to serve as the base. Oh, and I've already stumbled a little. I made the floor plan based on some drawings that I found, but I didn't have any scale references to work from. So I was kind of aiming for 1:200 scale, but I totally missed the mark. And what's more, I don't think the scale was consistent in length and width. When I later went to the actual church and pasted out, I got different measurements in both directions. So at any rate, I'm just going to paste this floor plan to the base to help guide the rest of the build. So the next step is to design the columns that hold the church up. Now, since the interior will be hidden from view, I didn't have to use columns or try to reproduce the ones that are actually in the church. But one of the best ways to understand a structure is to build the skeleton first, and so in this case that means columns. So I designed them using Tinkercad, #notsponsored. And I printed them on a Prusa i3 Mark III, again #notsponsored. So after several hours of printing, we have some nice columns. Here's one. And a few of its buddies. And here's a few more. Is all of that even gonna fit? Whoa, back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. I jumped straight into the project without even explaining why there is an observatory on a church in the first place. Believe it or not, there was already an observatory at the Roman College even before this one, but it was on top of Torre Calandrelli, which is tall and narrow. The structure was fine for early astronomy and meteorology, but it moved slightly in the wind. And that's bad for the more precise astronomical work that people were beginning to do by the 19th century. So enter our hero, Father Angelo Secchi. He became the director of the Observatory of the Roman College in 1848, and he had some grand ideas. Spectroscopy was a brand new field of study, and people were only just beginning to study the spectral lines in sunlight. Secchi wanted to study the spectra of stars, and this would require bigger telescopes and and a solid, immovable platform to plant them on. But where to build it? Why, on top of the church, of course. You see, when it was built in the mid-16th century, they had planned to put a giant dome on top. But there were problems with funding and some political issues that I won't get into. But to make a long story short, no dome was ever built. Instead, the famous Jesuit brother Andrea Pozzo painted a dome on the flat ceiling. You can go and see it today if you visit it. Nevertheless, all of the supports for the dome were part of the original architectural design, and the thick stone columns made a perfect platform to support the new telescopes. And so Secchi constructed his observatory directly on top of them. This is a literal case of the church supporting science. Okay, it's time to get back to the build. For gluing on paper, a bit of classic school glue should do the trick. This kind of reminds me of the old macaroni art and stuff that I did back in kindergarten. And this process might take a little while, so let's speed it up a bit. And it's about here that I finally realized it's easier and faster to apply the glue directly to the paper instead of painting it on each column. It's time for the big central columns that should have held up the dome. Oh, will I see the mistake in time? Guess not. Lab coats and parts that stick up don't mix. This is the first of several little mishaps I ran into where I caught the sleeve on something. So now the pièce de résistance. The Mertz telescope will rest directly above this column. Oh, wait a minute. Gosh darn, wouldn't you know it? I mixed up the columns. That's better. With all the columns up, it kind of looks like a cityscape. I think that's way cool. Now we have to block in the top, and here I'm designing the piece that will hold the observatory complex. And after a bit more printing, we have the ceiling parts. Let's take a quick tour of the observatory facilities. Here we're going to have the Mertz refractor, the main telescope. And here there will be a Meridian transit telescope. Secchi's offices were located in this part. And over here was the terrestrial magnetism laboratory. Now to secure plastic on plastic, I'm using model hobby glue. That's more secure than school glue. And while the glue cures, we can secure it in place using a flexible adhesive clamping system. And you might call it masking tape, but I prefer fancy technical terms. This part gave me no end of problems lining it up with the columns and securing it in place. Only later did I realize that I messed up a few critical measurements. They were only off by a little bit, but it was a very important little bit, and for a brief moment I thought I might be able to live with it anyway. But no, I changed my mind and printed a whole new piece. That just fits better. Nice. And with the skeleton up, let's add some skin, walls. The walls will be made out of poster board. So some of the walls need window cutouts, and rather than trying to make precise measurements, it's easier to just paste on a printed template. And since I'll be adding detailed layers later and painting over everything, it's fine to just leave it on there. But if you don't want the paper on the surface, you can print it flipped horizontally and paste it on the back side of the board. Along the main aisle of the church, there will be a series of tall windows, which will look great on the final model, but it means a lot of tedious repetition cutting out all the openings. That's boring. So maybe I can try the "this old Tony" approach. That didn't work. What if I use poorly documented force powers? Wow, I can't believe that worked. Okay, I think the glue is finally dried, so let's remove that tape. I mean those flexible adhesive clamps. Now we can secure the walls in place. Start with a few dabs of glue. There will eventually be a set of small domes put on top of this piece, and in the real church each one has a side altar underneath. One of these days I'll learn not to block the camera with my arm, but not today. So I have to explain a little bit about what I'm doing here. The real church has a building abutting it right here. I had to decide whether to include that building or to keep this as a standalone structure. And at least for now, I decided to build it as though all the sides were exposed by copying the windows that are on the other side of the church. That arm is just still in the way. The wall on this part needed to extend out a little bit, so I 3D printed a spacer of the right width. And just one more piece, and we've got all the walls up. Well, now that these walls are up, this thing is starting to look like an actual church. There's still, of course, a very long way to go with this project. We need to clean up these walls, and then we need to add a lot of details. So, for instance, there are some domes over these side chapels here. There are buttresses. And of course, this whole roof is still completely uncompleted. We need even to add the telescope domes, which is what you're watching this project for, plus the apse in the back, the facade out front. There's still a long ways to go with this project, so I hope you stay tuned to see how it progresses. I hope you enjoyed this project. If so, please like and subscribe, and hit that bell so you'll be notified when the next video comes out. Now, this video is not sponsored by the Vatican Observatory, but for full disclosure, I should mention that I do make use of their facilities and resources. However, the materials and tools come out of my own personal budget. The purpose of the Vatican Observatory is to be a sign to the world of the compatibility of faith and science, and it could use your support. If you'd like to support the work of the Vatican Observatory, or even just learn a little bit more about it, there's a link in the description below. Thank you.